bodybuilding has always been a laboratory, not the sterile kind with white coats and approval stamps. The kind where ambition meets chemistry, marketing meets desperation, and products move faster than science can measure them. For decades, the supplement industry and underground networks have pushed compounds, methods, and substances into gym culture with one promise: results now, consequences later. This is a story of 14 wild bodybuilding experiments that exploded into the market and got banned immediately. These aren't cautionary tales about personal choices. They're exposés of a system. How loopholes get monetized, how marketing exploits identity, and how rules chase innovation in an endless game of catch-up. From herbal fat burners that trigger federal action to designer steroids built to evade testing. From legal hormones that became controlled substances to contaminated supplements that destroy careers. Each case reveals the same pattern. Someone found a gap. Someone sold a dream. And someone eventually closed the door. One quick note before we begin. This is documentary research, not medical advice. Nothing here is guidance on what to use, how to use it, or where to find it. This is about understanding the system. Let's start with the experiment that set the template for everything that followed. Number 1, ephedra fat burners, when herbal meant speed. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, ephedra alkaloids became the crown jewel of the fat burner market. The pitch was flawless. Burn fat, train harder, control appetite, all from something herbal and natural. That botanical framing mattered. It made ephedra feel safe, even as users experienced effects that resembled pharmaceutical stimulants. The industry understood gym psychology perfectly. Dieting is suffering, and anything that turns suffering into speed and momentum will sell. The marketing worked because it delivered results people could feel immediately. The energy kick, the suppressed hunger, the sweat-drenched workouts. That instant reward loop guaranteed repeat purchases. Ephedra products exploded across supplement store shelves, backed by aggressive advertising campaigns. But adverse event reports piled up: cardiovascular incidents, strokes, seizures. On February 11, 2004, the FDA issued a final rule declaring dietary supplements containing ephedrine alkaloids adulterated, citing an unreasonable risk under labeled or ordinary conditions of use. The ban was comprehensive and immediate. Major retailers pulled products. The era ended, except it didn't really end. The demand never disappeared. It just searched for a new name. Within a few years, the market had pivoted to the next legal stimulant story, hunting for compounds that could replicate ephedra's effects without tripping the same regulatory wires. The experiment failed, but the lesson it taught the industry was invaluable. Find the edge, ride it hard, and when the door closes, find another door. Number 2, DMAA pre-workout. The geranium extract that wasn't. When DMAA arrived in the mid-2000s, it came wrapped in botanical camouflage. Labels called it geranium extract or listed it under scientific names that sounded like they belonged in a plant database. The framing was deliberate. Make it sound natural, make it sound researched, and bury the fact that this compound delivered a stimulant punch that gym goers instantly recognized. The appeal was pure behavioral psychology. Take the powder, wait 20 minutes, and feel the switch flip. That sensation. Focus sharpening, energy surging, fatigue vanishing. Turn casual buyers into loyal customers. Word spread through gym locker rooms faster than any advertising campaign could manage. Products like Jack 3D and Oxylete Pro became household names in bodybuilding circles. The FDA wasn't buying the geranium story. The agency repeatedly stated that DMAA is illegal in dietary supplements and launched enforcement actions against manufacturers. In 2013, the FDA administratively detained shipments of Oxylete Pro and Jack 3D after companies refused voluntary compliance. Those products were destroyed. Manufacturing with DMAA stopped, at least officially. But the formula didn't disappear. Only the label changed. New stimulants appeared with new botanical backstories and new chemical abbreviations. The marketing language stayed identical. Advanced formula, next generation energy, scientifically designed. The industry learned that bans create vocabulary problems, not business problems. You don't need the same ingredient. You need the same promise. Number 3, THG the clear, the designer steroid that science caught. Tetrahydrogestrinone, THG the clear, represents the ultimate doping fantasy, performance enhancement that leaves no trace. Developed in the early 2000s, THG was a designer steroid engineered specifically to evade existing drug tests. It wasn't meant for the masses. It was meant for athletes operating at the highest levels, where margins are measured in milliseconds and milligrams. The promise wasn't just strength or recovery, it was invisibility. The distribution was surgical. Balco, the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, became ground zero for THG's entry into elite sport. Athletes received the compound through carefully controlled channels, with explicit reassurances that testing technology couldn't detect it. For a brief window, that was true. Anti-doping labs tested samples, found nothing, and athletes competed clean on paper while enhanced in reality. Then science closed the gap. In 2003, a whistleblower provided a syringe containing THC residue to the UCLA Olympic Analytical Laboratory. Dr. Don Catlin and his team reverse engineered the compound, identified its structure, and developed a test to detect it. Suddenly, frozen samples from previous competitions could be retested. Athletes who thought they were safe discovered their names on positive test lists. The Balco scandal that followed exposed the entire network and became one of the most documented anti-doping cases in history. But the broader lesson went deeper. The designer steroid playbook didn't die with THG. It just moved to the next molecule. Anti-doping is a permanent arms race, and every detection method breeds a new generation of compounds engineered to stay one step ahead. Number 4, prohormone boom. When legal steroids became illegal, the prohormone era was a masterclass in legitimacy through proximity. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, bottles promising legal steroid effects sat on supplement store shelves next to protein powder and creatine. That shelf placement did psychological heavy lifting. If it's here, between the multivitamins and the amino acids, it must be okay. Products like androstenedione became mainstream. The marketing sold transformation without consequences, muscle growth and strength gains framed as natural progression rather than pharmaceutical intervention. Manufacturers exploited the legal gray zone ruthlessly, arguing that since these weren't technically controlled substances, they belonged in the supplement aisle. Taking prohormones became a status marker, proof you were serious enough to use advanced nutrition. Congress eventually noticed. The Anabolic Steroid Control Act of 2004 expanded Schedule III classification, pulling dozens of prohormone compounds off shelves and reclassifying them as controlled substances. Overnight, products that had been sold legally for years became felonies to possess without a prescription. The crackdown triggered the predictable response. Manufacturers reformulated. New compounds appeared, marketed with similar language but technically different molecular structures. Some moved operations online. Others rebranded entirely, framing their products as natural testosterone support while dancing around explicit hormone claims. The lesson the industry learned wasn't stop selling hormones. It was get better at legal engineering. Number 5. SARMs enter the gym, the research chemicals that weren't. Selective androgen receptor modulators, SARMs, enter gym culture through a backdoor labeled research. These synthetic compounds, investigated for potential medical applications, were never approved as dietary supplements. That didn't stop them from appearing in online stores, often sold as research chemicals, with disclaimers stating they're not for human consumption. The marketing hit psychological triggers perfectly. Next generation, selective, advanced pharmacology. Every descriptor sold sophistication and status. Buyers weren't just purchasing muscle gains. They were buying membership in an informed, cutting-edge community. The fact that SARMs existed in regulatory gray zones made them more appealing, not less. The FDA responded aggressively. In 2017, the agency issued warning letters explicitly citing products containing SARMs as unapproved drugs that violate federal law. The warnings reference adverse event reports, liver toxicity, stroke, heart attack. Meanwhile, the World Anti-Doping Agency had already placed SARMs on prohibited substance lists, banning them in competitive sport worldwide. Athletes testing positive face suspensions, stripped titles, destroy careers, and yet they persist. New brand names appear. Products get relabeled. Online sellers operate from jurisdictions with looser enforcement. Third-party testing occasionally catches SARMs in products that don't list them on labels. The experiment proves a frustrating pattern. When something is banned in sport but available for purchase, enforcement becomes an endless game of whack-a-mole. Number 6. DMPAS, a cutting shortcut. The industrial chemical that won't die. DMP isn't a supplement. It's an industrial chemical with a documented history of causing severe toxicity and death. And yet, it keeps reappearing in bodybuilding's underground cutting culture. Medical toxicology literature makes the danger explicit. DMP poisoning causes hyperthermia that can't be reversed, peripheral neuropathy, cataracts, and fatalities. Germany's Federal Institute for Risk Assessment has issued explicit warnings that DMP in dietary supplements can cause severe intoxication and death. The psychological hook is extreme. The promise of the fastest possible fat loss. DMP appeals to impatience in its purest form. The belief that suffering can be compressed into days instead of months if you're willing to accept enough risk. It's marketed through whisper networks and underground forums, where users share protocols while downplaying or rationalizing the danger. The pitch frames caution as weakness and risk as seriousness. That framing is predatory. DMP doesn't live in regulatory gray zones because authorities haven't gotten around to addressing it. It's banned for human consumption precisely because the risk profile is catastrophic. There is no safe dose. There is no medical supervision that makes it acceptable. The pattern reveals a brutal truth. Some experiments don't die because legality changes or enforcement improves. They die only when individuals stop seeking them. DMP keeps returning because obsession with appearance, with deadline, with extreme outcomes, creates demand that shady markets will always try to fill. Number 7, sibutramine, the pull drug that became a hidden ingredient. Sibutramine's story feels surreal. A prescription weight loss drug so risky it was pulled from the market, only to reappear secretly in products marketed as natural fat burners. Originally sold as Meridia, sibutramine was a pharmaceutical appetite suppressant prescribed for obesity treatment. Then data revealed increased cardiovascular risks in certain patients. In October 2010, the FDA requested voluntary withdrawal. By December 2010, approval was officially revoked. The drug was dead, except it wasn't. Cutting culture had created demand that didn't disappear just because a drug lost approval. Manufacturers of weight loss supplements saw an opportunity. If customers wanted fast results, why not add sibutramine to formulas without listing it on the label? The practice became disturbingly common. The FDA's tainted supplements database documented case after case of products marketed as herbal fat burners that, when tested, contained sibutramine. The contamination created a perverse situation. Buyers thought they were purchasing supplements. They read labels promising natural botanical extracts. Instead, they were unknowingly consuming a withdrawn prescription drug with documented cardiovascular risks, often at doses and combinations never studied for safety. This pattern exposes the ugly reality of supplement adulteration. When demand exists and enforcement is spotty, some manufacturers will spike products with active pharmaceutical ingredients to guarantee results. Testing reveals a contamination, warnings get issued, specific products get flagged, and the cycle repeats with new brands and new deceptive labels. Number 8, steroid-like supplements, the muscle products that hid their ingredients. The FDA's consumer warnings about bodybuilding products tell a recurring story. Muscle-building supplements marketed with protein powder aesthetics that, when tested, contain actual steroids or steroid-like substances. These aren't accidental contaminations. They're strategic adulterations designed to guarantee results while maintaining plausible deniability through labeling. The agency has documented serious adverse events, including liver injury severe enough to require medical intervention. In June 2017, the FDA posted warning letters to multiple firms for illegally marketed products labeled to contain steroid and steroid-like substances promoted for muscle building. The letters made the violation explicit. These weren't supplements. They were unapproved drugs being sold through supplement channels. The marketing psychology is straightforward. If it looks like typical supplement branding, buyers treat it like typical supplement risk. Clean label design, scientific-sounding names, third-party certification badges. These elements create false confidence. Meanwhile, hardcore branding sells risk as proof of seriousness. Products marketed with aggressive imagery signal to buyers that they're beyond mainstream offerings. The aftershock is predictable. Crackdowns trigger reformulations or rebrands. Warning letters force companies offline temporarily until they reappear with new names and identical formulas. The pattern shows that when profit margins are high enough and enforcement resources are limited enough, some manufacturers will keep playing shell game. Number 9. The 1990 drug-tested MR. Olympia, the one-year experiment that vanished. In 1990, the IFBB made a decision that shocked professional bodybuilding. They instituted drug testing at the Mr. Olympia, the sport's most prestigious competition. This wasn't product being pulled or a compound being restricted. It was an experiment in enforcement, an attempt to create a clean era at the sport's highest level. The audience response was immediate and negative. Fans complained that physiques looked smaller, less impressive, less spectacular. The spectacle that defined professional bodybuilding, the freakish mass, the cartoonish proportions, felt diminished. Critics argued that drug testing removed what made the sport compelling. The economics backed them up. Ticket sales, sponsor interest, and media coverage all suggested that the clean version wasn't what people wanted to watch. By 1991, the experiment ended. The IFBB reversed course, and drug testing at the Olympia disappeared. The sport returned to its established standard. Don't ask, don't tell, and let the physiques speak for themselves. This case reveals something crucial. Sometimes the market punishes reform faster than regulators punish violations. The 1990 Olympia proved that when economics reward extreme results, attempting to enforce restrictions creates customer dissatisfaction. If your audience wants spectacle over safety and your revenue depends on delivering what they want, enforcement becomes a business risk. The cultural ban wasn't on drugs. It was on the idea of serious testing. Number 10. Blood manipulation methods. The bright red line anti-doping won't cross. Blood manipulation occupies a unique category in anti-doping enforcement. The bright red line, nobody gets across, no excuses accepted. The World Anti-Doping Agency's prohibited list is explicit. Any form of intravascular manipulation of the blood or blood components is banned, with language designed to close loopholes before they open. The justification is twofold. First, competition integrity. Blood manipulation methods create advantages that can't be equalized through training or nutrition. They're medical interventions that fundamentally alter physiology. Second, risk. These methods require medical procedures that carry inherent dangers, from infection risks to cardiovascular complications. But the rulebook's clarity doesn't mean enforcement is simple. As testing improves, methods evolve. Athletes work with medical professionals to find protocols that might evade detection windows. Underground networks share information about timing and masking. The anti-doping arms race continues. The aftershock of every caught case is expansion. Each violation leads to rulebook clarifications, tighter language, and new testing protocols. Blood manipulation remains prohibited not because it's being normalized, but because the temptation never disappears. Elite sport operates at margins where tiny advantages determine careers. And when the stakes are that high, some athletes will always test boundaries. Anti-doping's response is consistent. This line doesn't move. Number 11. IV infusions as a performance tool. When medical theater meets rule books. IV infusions and injections entered athletic recovery culture wrapped in medical legitimacy. The visual sells itself. An IV bag, sterile equipment, clinical precision. It looks serious. It feels advanced. And for recovery-obsessed athletes, that medical theater is psychologically powerful. The pitch was straightforward. Rehydrate faster, deliver nutrients more efficiently, bounce back quicker than competitors who rely on food and sleep. Anti-doping bodies responded with specific restrictions. WADA rules prohibit IV infusions and injections over 100 milliliters per 12-hour period except under legitimate hospital circumstances or medical necessity. The threshold is precise, enough to allow genuine medical care, restrictive enough to prevent performance manipulation. The reasoning is multilayered. IV infusions can be used to dilute samples or mask prohibited substances. Clinics and practitioners market IV therapies as legal recovery tools, carefully positioning protocols to stay within technical compliance while maximizing perceived benefit. Athletes receive infusions that deliver hydration, vitamins, amino acids, sometimes with careful monitoring to ensure volumes stay under prohibited thresholds. But anti-doping agencies remain skeptical of the entire category. The concern isn't just about specific violations. It's about normalizing medical interventions as standard athletic practice. The 100 milliliter limit exists to draw a clear line. Below this, it's tolerated under certain conditions. Above it, questions get asked. Number 12. Diuretics AS, a stage dry-out trick. The masking agent that targets two problems. Diuretics occupy a special category in prohibited substance lists. They're banned both for what they do directly and for what they help hide. The World Anti-Doping Agency classifies them under S5, diuretics and masking agents, acknowledging that their appeal operates on two levels. For physique athletes, diuretics promise rapid fluid manipulation to achieve that coveted dry look. For athletes using other prohibited substances, diuretics offer something more valuable, dilution and masking that might help evade detection. In bodybuilding stage culture, the pre-competition dryout has become ritualized. Competitors manipulate water intake, sodium levels, and sometimes pharmaceutical diuretics to shed subcutaneous water in the final hours before stepping on stage. That belief creates pressure to pursue every possible advantage, including methods with serious medical risks. The danger isn't theoretical. Diuretic abuse can cause dangerous electrolyte imbalances, dehydration severe enough to require hospitalization, and in extreme cases, cardiac complications. The desperation to look perfect for a single day leads athletes to accept risks that rational analysis would reject. Anti-doping enforcement treats diuretics harshly because of their dual role. Testing positive isn't just a violation. It raises suspicions about what else might be present. Athletes caught with diuretics face questioning about their entire supplement and substance protocol. The category remains a repeated ban trigger, proof that when appearance determines success, some will always gamble with prohibited shortcuts. Number 13. Clenbuterol AS, a cutting tool, the not a steroid loophole that wasn't. Clenbuterol entered bodybuilding's cutting culture with a narrative designed to sound like a loophole. It's not a steroid. That framing mattered. Steroids carried stigma, legal risks, and clear prohibited status. Clenbuterol, originally developed for respiratory conditions, got marketed as something different, a cutting tool that preserved muscle while accelerating fat loss, technically distinct from anabolic steroids. The not a steroid argument worked psychologically. Athletes could rationalize usage by focusing on what it wasn't rather than what it was. A prohibited substance with serious side effects, including cardiac complications, tremors, and electrolyte imbalances. The cutting phase is where bodybuilding's body dysmorphia intensifies. Every pound of muscle loss feels catastrophic. Anything promising to preserve muscle tissue while accelerating fat oxidation becomes psychologically magnetic. Anti-doping bodies weren't fooled by the classification games. The World Anti-Doping Agency's prohibited substance lists explicitly include clenbuterol, treating it with the same seriousness as traditional anabolic agents. Whether or not it fits the technical definition of a steroid is irrelevant. What matters is that it provides performance advantages through pharmaceutical intervention and carries health risks. Clenbuterol cases continue appearing in doping control reports, partly because the cutting market remains obsessed with compounds that promise physique changes food and training alone can't reliably produce. The not a steroid framing failed to create the legal loophole users hoped for. Number 14. The supplement contamination trap, when the experiment chooses you. Supplement contamination represents the cruelest version of the bodybuilding experiment, the one where you're the test subject without knowing you volunteered. This isn't about choosing prohibited substances. It's about purchasing product marketed as routine supplements that contain undisclosed pharmaceutical ingredients, steroids, stimulants, banned compounds that turn routine supplementation into unintended violations with career-ending or health-damaging consequences. The scale of the problem is documented. A JAMA Network Open study analyzing FDA warnings from 2007 to 2016 identified 776 adulterated dietary supplements, many marketed for muscle building. These products contain unapproved pharmaceutical ingredients, sometimes multiple compounds in a single bottle. The contamination is often intentional spiking, manufacturers adding active pharmaceutical ingredients to guarantee results while maintaining labels that promise natural, safe, legal supplementation. The trap works because consumer trust assumes regulatory protection. Buyers read labels, check for certification badges, purchase from seemingly legitimate retailers. They assume that if something is sold legally, it must match its claims. Products deliver noticeable results because they contain actual drugs. Users attribute success to the marketed ingredients rather than the hidden adulterants. This is why third-party testing programs exist. Organizations like NSF and Informed Choice emerge precisely because the FDA can't test everything. Athletes subject to drug testing learn paranoia the hard way. Even routine supplements can destroy careers if they contain contamination. You're responsible for what's in your system, even when labels lie about what's in the bottle. Every experiment in this list follows the same arc. Someone found a gap, built a pitch, sold a dream, and eventually hit a wall. The wall might have been regulators, testing technology, adverse event reports, or public backlash, but the pattern is consistent. Bodybuilding culture's relationship with these experiments isn't about individual recklessness. It's about how markets exploit ambition, how identity gets sold as chemicals, and how loopholes get monetized faster than rules can react. The lesson isn't that bans work perfectly. They don't. Enforcement is always playing catch-up, and for every door that closes, sellers search for another entry point. But each crackdown teaches us something valuable about how these systems operate. The marketing tactics that normalize risk, the psychological hooks that turn products into identities, and the regulatory mechanisms that eventually respond when costs become impossible to ignore. If you found this documentary valuable, hit subscribe for more deep dives into bodybuilding history, supplement industry mechanics, and the stories behind the compounds that shape gym culture. Leave a comment with the experiment that surprised you most, or the one you've seen reappear under different names. And remember, understanding these patterns isn't about judgment. It's about seeing the system clearly so you can navigate it with open eyes.